Okay, I call this meeting to order and welcome everybody to our 100th meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. Yes, in our 44th Parliament. So it's a great day, nice number. I do hope you all have had a great summer with your family and friends and constituents.
Just point of order.
Yes, point of order.
Has any other committee done 100 yet, Peter? Just Mr. Chairman?
And that's 100 official meetings, MP Lawrence. I don't think any other committee, but yeah, I could be wrong. I'll look to the analyst or the clerk. They may know and provide that, but we've had that, and those are official meetings. I think we've had even many more than that. But on that, just on the note of the summer, like I said, I hope that everybody got an opportunity to be with family, friends, recharge, talk to your constituents. Many Canadians, I'm sure, and that you've heard from. So we've got a lot of work to do, and with our pre-budget consultation. We're going to be hearing from stakeholders, from labor, from business, academia, civil society. And I know that our excellent Finance Committee members are going to do a great job and be very active on this. Also, here's another one. We have received what I believe is a record number of submissions of briefs to our committee for our pre-budget consultation from stakeholders. It's around 850. I'll look to the analysts. 850 submissions that we've received. Outside our Ottawa meetings, we will be visiting communities across Canada in October and November. Our committee is made up of members from right across our great country. We have a number of new members to our Finance Committee and many veterans. So new to our committee, we have P.S. Bendayan, who's with us, and welcome, and MP Thompson, and MP Wheeler, who are all new to the committee, and our veterans, MP Baker and MP Zerowitz, MP and Vice Chair Howland, MP Morantz, MP Chambers, MP Lawrence, MP and Vice Chair Sainte-Marie, and MP Blakey. So I'm not going to go through all of your riding names. I know you're going to have an opportunity when you ask questions and when you get into discussion to be able to highlight many of the things that are going on in your ridings and in your regions. Also, great to be back with an outstanding team, as I said, the analysts, the clerks, the interpreters, support team, and of course all the members, staff that are with us here. And we're here to all work together and to do a good job. So let's get into it. Pursuant to Standing Order 83.1 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, June 8th, 2023, the committee is meeting to discuss the pre-budget consultations in advance of the 2024 budget. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Although this room is equipped with powerful audio system, feedback events can occur. These can be extremely harmful to interpreters and could cause serious injuries. The most common cause of sound feedback is an earpiece worn too close to a microphone. We therefore ask all participants to exercise a high degree of caution when handling the earpieces, especially when your microphone or your neighbor's microphone is turned on. In order to prevent incidents and safeguard the hearing health of the interpreters, I invite participants to ensure that they speak into the microphone in which their headset is plugged in, and to avoid manipulating the earbuds by placing them on the table away from the microphone when they are not in use. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raised hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. In accordance with the committee's routine motion concerning connection tests for witnesses, I'm informing the committee, and this is through the clerk, that all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting, and I would now like to welcome our witnesses. So joining us as an individual, we have Associate Professor of the Sprott School of Business from Carleton University, Ian Lee. Welcome. with us from the Canadian Labour Congress, B. Bruce, the president, is with us, and the National Director of Social and Economic Policy Department, Chris Roberts. From Edge Realty Analytics Limited, we have Ben Rabidou, who is a housing analyst. And from Fonds d'Action Populaire en Réaménagement Urbain, we have Véronique Laflamme, who is a spokesperson for the organization. And we have Let Go Brosseau and Associates, Inc., and with us is President Daniel Brosseau and Vice President Peter Letgo. Also joining us is from the Native Child and Family Services of Ontario, the Director of Governance and Strategy, Jeffrey Schiffer, is with us. And on that, we will ask, starting from the top with Ian Lee, you'll have up to 5 minutes to make an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. First, my disclosures. I do not belong to or donate money to any political party or allow lawn signs during federal, provincial, or municipal elections. Number two, I was mortgage manager of the fourth largest BMO branch in Canada, Ottawa main office, now the Sir John A. Macdonald Reception Centre for your Parliament Hill, during the late 70s and early 80s when inflation peaked at 14% and interest rates peaked at 20%. Third disclosure, I'm a tenured prof paid by Carleton, not by business or NGOs, as I do not consult or lobby. And my fourth disclosure, immediately after the collapse of the Berlin Wall in 1989 through 2020, I taught over 100 times in former centrally planned economies across Central East Europe, and later multiple times in Cuba, China, and Iran, where governments frequently set prices and production quotas. And I witnessed the massive systemic shortages of food and consumer goods across each of these economies in the early to mid-90s. Everyone in Canada today is understandably concerned with inflationary prices, especially food and housing and increasing interest rates. And there's a tendency to blame the firms at the end of what Harvard strategy prof Michael Porter accurately calls the value chain system, not the profit maximization chain claimed by some MPs. Restated, these critics focus on the symptoms of inflation rather than examining not only the totality of the value chain system of 2 million corporations in Canada, per StatsCan, but what David Dodge, David Rosenberg, and others call the economic fundamentals. Fundamentals include Canada's dramatic decline in productivity and our terrible decline in business capital investment. However, before going further with this issue, I want to discuss inflation briefly, because it's central to everything we're going to be talking about, I think. Inflation in the late 60s did indeed originate in the U.S. due to President Johnson's war in Vietnam and the war on poverty, which led to massive spending increases, but a simultaneous refusal by the American government to raise taxes or increase interest rates to cool down the economy. But however, inflation was exacerbated when it crossed the border into Canada by very large Canadian government deficits and a refusal initially by the BOC to raise interest rates. Inflation went to 4 to 5, I lived through this, 4 to 5 to 8 to 10, peaking at 14, causing the greatest harm to the lowest income people in Canada. It was only when Governor Bowie of the BOC and Chairman Volcker of the Fed decided to attack the out-of-control inflation with enormous increases in interest rates that peaked around 20% that they finally killed inflation. While our fiscal profligacy was only finally addressed by the courageous decisions of Prime Minister Chrétien and Finance Minister Martin in 1995 in eliminating the out-of-control fiscal deficits. These monetary and fiscal policies produced very low inflation and very strong income growth for everyone for a third of a century. It's now very clear we have forgotten these lessons, and it's time to go back to school. Today, rising inflation was indeed caused by the lockdowns and supply chain interruptions, but exacerbated by massive, excessive monetary and fiscal stimulus. Rates were far too low for far too long. Please read Mohammed Al-Arian's op-eds in the Financial Times. He's now the head of Cambridge University. Some argue that interest rate increases cause inflation. These critics fail to understand the arithmetic of monetary policy. Interest rate increases subtract or take money out of the bank account of every last one of us and businesses, leaving less money to buy stuff. Some argue that grocery store executives are greedy and profit gouging, notwithstanding that for my entire adult lifetime studying this industry, any person who conducts industry comparative analysis knows that grocery retailing has notoriously low net profit margins, empirically validated by StatsCan and the audited financials. I'm urging parliamentarians to return to an examination of the economic fundamentals of Canada by examining low productivity, protectionist policies in certain industries such as airlines, telecom, agriculture that exclude foreign competitors that drive up prices to much higher levels, to examine competition policy that currently allows industry consolidation to a handful of oligopolistic firms when there's a clear consensus in economic research that concentrated or oligopolistic industries are less competitive and charge higher prices than fragmented industries with many firms. I strongly urge parliamentarians to examine the role of government policies, including taxes that increase the cost of doing business. See the recent CD House study on how multiple government taxes increase average housing costs by up to a third. You must undertake a fundamental review of the remarkable number of barriers in industry after industry that restrict entry by new firms or restrict competitiveness or through taxation force prices to be increased. In closing, it is timely to recall Pogo's very wise words. We have met the enemy, and it is us, or more precisely, no offense intended, it is you, the elected officials, who have approved these extensive, multiple barriers time after time in bill after bill, year after year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, and right on time. And now we'll hear from the Canadian Labour Congress. And just witnesses and members, just before we go to the Canadian Labour Congress, when there's about a minute left in your time, I'm just going to kind of put up this sheet so everybody will kind of know that and keep you on track. So, okay, Canadian Labour Congress, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to committee members. I'm coming to you from the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Territory. It's my honor and my pleasure to be here with you today, and the Canadian Labour Congress advocates on behalf of all workers in Canada. The 55 national and international unions that are affiliated with the CLC bring together over 3 million workers in virtually all sectors, industries, occupations, and regions of this country. Workers in Canada currently are suffering the intense cost of living pressures. But with bold action, we believe that government can help alleviate these pressures. Government can make ambitious investments to provide more affordable, non-market housing for workers in need. The CLC recommends that Budget 2024 allocate $20 billion a year in capital funding to the National Housing Co-Investment Fund. Together with provincial partners and other public contributions, this will help build a minimum of 100,000 new units per year. Budget 2024 should accelerate the rollout of the National Housing Strategy's Federal Lands Initiative for affordable housing. And government should introduce a dedicated 5-year, $10 billion public land acquisition fund to acquire additional land for the construction of non-market affordable rental housing. In order to assist the community housing sector to acquire existing affordable rental buildings, the government should create a $20 billion housing acquisition fund in order to maintain the supply of affordable housing for low and modest income households. The CLC also recommends that in order to cope with high food prices, Budget 2024 impose a windfall profit tax on large food retailers and use the revenues to fund an extension of the existing grocery rebate program. The cost of the prescription drugs situation is also a major affordability issue for Canadians. We call on the federal government to accelerate the current plans to introduce a national public pharmacare program in Canada. That should entail passing enabling legislation by the end of 2023, implementing without delay an essential medicines formulary, and implementing the bulk purchasing plan by the end of 2023. Our multi-payer patchwork system that we currently have has left Canada paying among the highest prescription drug prices in the world. And we know that in 2020, Canadian households paid nearly $7 billion out of their own pockets for prescription medicines. Numerous studies have linked the high cost of prescription drugs and related charges like deductibles and co-payments to patients not taking their drugs as prescribed, and that overall raises the cost of our healthcare system. Canada's unions want to see a truly universal pharmacare plan implementing a single payer system of public insurance coverage for prescription drugs. As a reminder, the Hoskins report advocated for a universal single-payer public pharmacare program and noted that it would reduce the cost of prescription drugs for employers and businesses by $16.6 billion and for families by $6.4 billion. I also want to address the issue of employment insurance. Since 2019, the federal government has committed to creating an EI system for the 21st century that works for everyone. Canadians are still waiting to see the results of years of consultations on EI. First, we had a global pandemic, and then this year, we've had disastrous floods and the worst forest fire season on record. These disasters have displaced tens of thousands of Canadians from their homes, jobs, and their communities. And now, the economy and the job market are beginning to cool, with the possibility of an economic downturn in the near term. The CLC called on the government to introduce an annual government contribution of 20% to EI program costs, and we know that this will help pay for improvements while minimizing employment insurance premium increases. We call on the government to commit to improving access by establishing a lower uniform national entrance requirement of the lesser of 360 hours or 12 weeks of insurable employment, and to provide up to 50 weeks of regular benefits to meet the needs of seasonal workers across this country. We're also calling for a raise on the ceiling of insurable earnings and to substantially increase the 55% benefit rate. We also expect to see a clawback at the end of the clawback of EI benefits due to severance and vacation pay, which workers have earned prior to a downturn requiring them to apply for EI. And as well, the ending of a 50-week restriction on combined special benefits with regular benefits, which disproportionately punishes women. And finally, I want to touch on Budget 2024 investments in sustainable jobs and environmental transition. The CLC welcomes the Sustainable Jobs Act. We want to see greater investments in social protections for workers in sectors at risk due to climate change. And that includes transition supports for workers, including skills recognition, training and retraining, relocation assistance, mental health programming, family supports, and other assistance programs. Budget 2024 investments in decarbonizing the economy has to include job quality strings, building on climate-focused investment tax credits, which were announced in Budget 2023. Job quality requirements will ensure low-carbon jobs that are well-paid, safe, and afford workers a say through access to a union, and ensure that the green investments are made in consultation with workers. Thank you, and I welcome any questions from the committee members.
Thank you, Ms. Brusk. And now to Edge Realty Analytics and Mr. Rabideau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, committee members. I've covered Canadian housing and household credit trends on behalf of institutional investors for over a decade now. I previously testified before this committee in 2022 regarding housing's role in the cost of living crisis in Canada. And if I could, I'd just like to go back and quote from that testimony. Quote, part of the current housing crisis can be traced back to 2019. At that time, population growth in Canada hit nearly 600,000 in 1 year, in part due to a 200,000 increase in non-permanent residents. Allowing population growth at this level without consideration of the real-world constraints is a policy failure that cannot be repeated. End quote. Now, let me fast forward to today. According to Statistics Canada, Canada's population has grown by 1.2 million in the past year, of which an unprecedented 730,000 consisted of non-permanent residents, such as international students and temporary workers. I've included charts in my submission that I would encourage the members to review. Importantly, the non-permanent resident cohort has no caps and no target set in Ottawa and is separate from the federal permanent resident target of 465,000 for 2023. I want to be crystal clear that my comments to follow should not be construed as criticism of immigration policies broadly or of Canada's permanent resident target, which I fully support. We need to be careful not to position this issue as a binary all or nothing issue. There's plenty of area for thoughtful discussion between zero and the current levels of growth, which have clearly had unintended consequences that we cannot ignore. So let's talk about those unintended consequences. It's important to note that non-permanent residents are overwhelmingly made up of renters, so it should be no surprise that when we add nearly 750,000 into the Canadian population in 1 year, that we would see an extremely disorderly rental market that has disproportionately hurt lower-income households. And we also need to be mindful that this growth has impacted the non-permanent resident cohort themselves, particularly international students who often find themselves living in substandard housing if they can find housing at all. We have failed them too. So according to CMHC, rental apartment vacancies had already fallen to 20-year lows late last year, while average rents in 2022 posted the largest annual increase since at least 1990. It is certainly worse today, and your constituents who have tried to find rental accommodations recently can attest to that. This dynamic is also contributing to the cost of living issues, as rents alone have added 0.4 percentage points to headline CPI as of last month. I believe we have a misaligned incentive structure at play as post-secondary institutions and the for-profit partnerships that they often work with have every incentive to increase international student enrollment due to the much higher tuition fees that these students pay and without regards for the local rental market that it might impact. Among the other unintended consequences is that this dynamic has contributed to housing speculation in recent years, as some landlords have discovered that while they cannot make a satisfactory return renting a single-family home to one family, the economics are very different if they can instead rent to a dozen or more international students. We are absolutely seeing this dynamic at play. Finally, I believe this level of population growth risks stoking anti-immigration sentiment. Consider the results of a Nanos poll this month that found that the share of Canadians who want lower immigration targets has risen sharply from 34% in March to 55% today. Our ability and willingness as a country to attract and welcome the best and brightest from around the world has been our superpower. It would be a shame if Canadians became disillusioned and lost that vision due to the disruptive trends we're seeing today. Now, I recognize that the provinces have a major role to play here, but the federal government still has some levers, and some things that can be done would include establishing a provincial level cap on international students, dissuading applications by raising student application visa fees, or reducing the number of hours that international students can work by issuing a fixed number of work permit for students each year. And finally, incentivizing new construction. And on that point, I would recognize that the elimination of the GST on new rentals is a welcome policy on that front. Shifting gears, if I may, for a moment, I'm going to leave that point there now, but I do also want to express my support for the submission from Mortgage Professionals Canada, which advocates for direct income verification between lenders and Canada Revenue Agency as a means to dissuade mortgage document fraud, which has become a very real problem in recent years. This is a problem with a simple, elegant solution, clearly articulated by Mortgage Professionals Canada, and there's absolutely no reason not to pursue this. I will leave it there, and I welcome your questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Robidoux. Now we go to Fonds d'Action Populaire en Réaménagement Urbain, and we have Madame Laflamme, please.
Good morning. The Front d'Action Populaire en Réaménagement Urbain is a Quebec group encompassing 145 social and community organizations active throughout Quebec. We focus on housing and community. For 45 years, we have been intervening on housing-related issues, promoting social housing as a fundamental implementation of social policy. We hear a lot about the housing crisis these days. It is multifaceted. The scarcity of rental housing, of which there is less in Quebec than in many years, and which is affecting almost all cities, is a serious issue. The crisis involves increasing lack of affordable housing. Between 2021 and 22, according to the CMHC, average rents increased by 7.7% in Canada. In Quebec, it rose by 9%. In Gatineau, near Parliament Hill, it went up by 22% in 1 year. The few affordable housing units are much more expensive. Average rents were $1,500 in Quebec this spring. That is affecting renters' ability to pay. The crisis is affecting thousands of renting families, particularly households with low and modest incomes. The problems are particularly affecting low-income housing. I will go back to figures from the 2022 census, which showed that about 1,200,000 households were spending more than 30% on their rent. Their average income is about $30,000. These households are unable to pay private rental rates, and cannot pay the rates for new housing, even with the government's help. And that is why I'm going to be focusing so much on off-market social housing. The Canadian government can and must do better to help low and medium income households. so that their ability to pay and their housing security is respected. We need to increase social housing, not-for-profit social housing, because what we have now is not enough. There's a private market monopoly, which is leaving renters in difficulty with no options, and many are finding themselves both homeless and sometimes visibly and sometimes invisibly. They are forced to wait for social housing for years. In Quebec, the social housing percentage as a percentage of total housing is at about 10.2%. History shows that it is quite possible to reverse that trend. Sustained investment by the federal government in policies and programs between 1971 and 91 increased social housing in Quebec from 0.5 to 9.7% of housing units. Those units are now part of our collective heritage and constitute a bulwark against rising rents and speculation, as well as gentrification. But now we are seeing homelessness increase. The criticisms we hear now are very similar to those that can be heard from the federal housing authorities, the National Housing Council, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, and the Auditor General. Housing needs to be a priority in the upcoming budget as well as in this fall's economic update. The federal plan is not complying with objectives established in legislation in 2019, which is to recognize the right to housing as a fundamental right, a fundamental human right as in international law. The government has been choosing to make housing open to the private sector for profit, as well as public non-profit interests. It also has access to construction. It is allowing construction without making sure that it is suited for those who need it. The federal government's policy has even contributed to rising rents. Only the initiative for accelerated starts has worked. The strategy is working, that is showing that the two most significant initiatives are funding houses that are in fact too expensive. Co-investment, though not a structural program, has helped increase the availability of cooperative housing in Quebec, but it is out of funds and has been for some time. So Frappru believes that it is necessary for the federal government to change tack and significantly increase investment in social housing. Thank you, Ms. Laflamme. Thank you.
To Mr. Brosseau and Mr. Letko from Letko Brosseau and Associates, Inc.
Thank you for inviting us this morning. We want to talk to you about pension funds, which represent 36% of institutional savings in Canada. Only slightly less than the banks, so we're talking about a very large pool of capital. Pension savings and how they are invested have been subject to major transformations over the last 30 years. Many changes have been unintended, and several have been quite damaging for both individual pensioners and the Canadian economy. The negative effects include a substantial decline in the proportion of private sector employees covered by pension plans, a rise in the much less efficient defined contribution plans at the expense of defined benefit plans, an increased reliance on subjective, opaque, and illiquid private markets, a disinvestment from transparent liquid public markets, an increased investment in low-return bonds, increased herding to the detriment of independent fundamental analysis, resulting in a decrease in vitality. But the negative effect that seems to attract the most attention has been the exit from Canada of Canadian pension funds. Canadian public equities held by Canadian pension funds fell from 80% of their total equities in 1990 to probably less than 10% now, representing under 4% of their total assets. The argument most often used to justify this behavior is the expectation of higher returns in foreign markets. In fact, returns in Canada have historically exceeded many other world markets, and by comparison, current valuation metrics are quite favorable. But let's assume for a moment that returns in Canada will be lower. The question remains whether maximizing single portfolio returns to the exclusion of other factors is the correct global strategy for the country as a whole. If pension funds siphon away Canadian savings under the guise of higher expected returns without considering the effect this may have on the ability of their contributors to earn incomes, the return calculations are incomplete from the point of view of the Canadian economy. $100 invested outside the country may generate an extra dollar of returns, but the impact of the absence of the $100 invested in the local economy may be much greater. The loss in domestic investment, sales, salaries, profits because of the lack of local investment by committed domestic investors can easily overshadow any small pickup in income that may have come from a higher return elsewhere. We may already have started to see the effects of this dynamic. GDP per capita in Canada in 1980 was 92% of U.S. GDP per capita. It has now fallen to less than 73% Now, consider two cases. A Canadian investor takes $100 of savings and invests it abroad. After 1 year, they bring back the $100 and $10 of profit. Their return is 10%. Second case, a Canadian investor takes $100 of savings and invests it in a machine that produces $205 of product in the year. The costs are $100 of salaries, $100 of wear on the machine, and $5 of profit. The return is less. It's 5%. So in case one, Canada's GDP would rise by $10, the profit. In case two, Canada's GDP would rise by $205, the salaries, the machine, and the profit. So even though the profit is less, the impact on GDP is much, much greater. From the Canadian investor's point of view, the foreign investment gives a higher return, but from a GDP perspective, from a GDP per capita perspective, from the perspective of Canada's ability to save, the domestic investment is by far, far the better one. In addition to these considerations, foreign investments can also present governance, political, legal, currency, supply, confiscation, and other risks which can sometimes be better managed domestically. It is unreasonable to think that Canadian pension funds will see the opportunity cost of the loss of investments in the Canadian economy to the ability of their contributors to earn good incomes and save. They cannot consider what they can't see. As a result, moral suasion cannot correct for these negative effects. Only a national policy reflected in appropriate regulations can constructively deal with the problem. In 2021, investment in Canada accounted for 20% of GDP, compared to 18% in the United States, so higher. But what these statistics hide is that investment in residential real estate in Canada was 9.7% versus 4.9% in the United States, which left 10.4% for non-residential investment in Canada versus 13.3% in the United States.
Brosseau, we're going to have to wrap up right there, and you'll have an opportunity, of course, during questions from members, and I'm sure there's going to be many. We do have to move on to now the Native Child and Family Services of Toronto, and Jeffrey Schiffer, please.
Thank you very much to the chair and to the committee members. I'm joining you this morning, or I guess this afternoon, depending on where you are in the country, from Treaty 13, so the ancestral homelands of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. I'm here today to speak a little bit about the federal transformation that's underway with respect to Indigenous child and family well-being. Native Child and Family Services of Toronto has served families in the Toronto and Peel area for the last 30 years. We started as a prevention agency and in 2004 began legislated child welfare. We currently serve about 8,000 unique community members annually from across Canada. Last year, serving members from 207 different First Nations across Canada. I'm here to talk a little bit about federal funding with respect to the transformation currently underway through new legislation under the Act respecting First Nations children and families, formerly Bill C-92, and the impact that that's had for service providers that are supporting Indigenous children and families in urban centres. I forgot to funding to date has largely been distinctions-based, which means that funding from the federal level is going directly to Indigenous governing bodies. And to be clear, that's something that Native Child certainly supports. I think that what we're seeing is that federal funding trends meant to support Canada's most important relationship, as stated by the Prime Minister, the relationship with First Nations, meant to move reconciliation forward, are not always getting to the children and families that require those services. So while funding at the federal level is going to First Nations and other governing bodies to do the work, which is largely on reserve, which is deeply needed and supported, we're seeing the majority of Indigenous children and families across Canada from coast to coast to coast living and accessing services off reserve. That's creating challenges for agencies that are operating in urban spaces that are trying to support the youngest, most rapidly growing, and most diverse demographic in Canada, which is Indigenous children and youth. So while these children and youth are continuing to face challenges that have been made much more acute by the pandemic, and that again are being made more challenging by the current economic space, agencies like Native Child are struggling. And so I am here today really to speak about understanding that all three levels of government have a responsibility to support Indigenous children. It's a collective responsibility to do that work, to speak to some of the things that I think the federal government can do to get ahead of some of these challenges, quite frankly, before they become acute and before they become drastically more expensive. There's three really well-developed mechanisms right now that agencies across Canada can access to support Indigenous children and families. The first is Jordan's Principle, and that's a funding program that really is meant to support Indigenous children regardless of where they are. And so, just to state that our access to that program really is leading to phenomenal outcomes, and just to say that the budget coming in 2024 should continue to invest in Jordan's Principle so that First Nations children can get access to the medical and mental health services that they need. The second program that's well developed is the Urban Indigenous Peoples Program, UPIP. That program historically has been quite underfunded, I'll say. The amount of money that's available for agencies working in urban spaces is quite small when we think about the magnitude of the challenges in front of us with respect to decolonization and reconciliation. And so, we at Native Child encourage the committee to think about how that program could be expanded or invested in ways that continue to allow agencies like Native Child to expand the service delivery that we provide. Finally, I think the most complex equation, in front of us as a nation is the recent Canadian Human Rights Tribunal final settlement, which really is going to talk about how Indigenous governing bodies begin to create their own legislation and change the way that Indigenous child and family services are delivered across the country. To date, that's been very distinctions-based. It's been led by the Assembly of First Nations and other parties to the settlement. And urban voices, which are actually providing the majority of the services, have not been included. And so, as an example, here in the province of Ontario, where a quarter of the children in Canada live, 85% of all investigations involving a First Nations child that involve child protection are happening off reserve. And the majority of the funding right now federally is going to on-reserve services. So that inequity creates challenges for urban agencies that are trying to get ahead of some of these challenges and support those kids. So I think that when we think about the status of First Nations children, when we think about the numerous challenges that they face, with respect to the history of colonization and current barriers, we have some work to do collectively to work across jurisdictions between the federal and provincial government to ensure that funding is available for agencies providing child and family services to Indigenous children and families. I'll leave it there and thank the committee for the time and look forward to any questions later. Miigwech.
Thank you, Mr. Schiffer, and all witnesses for your opening statements. We are going to move into our rounds of questions now. In our first round of questions, each party will have up to 6 minutes to ask questions of the witnesses. Just for everybody's information, Madame Laflamme does have a hard stop at 12:25 and has to leave. So we're starting with the Conservatives. I have MP Lawrence for 6 minutes, please.
A quick bit of housekeeping. Has Governor of Bank of Canada, Tiff Macklin, and the Finance Minister accepted our quarterly invitation to appear, or is that something we can follow up upon? If you don't have an answer immediately, that's fine.
I'll
That's
try to get
fine.
one from the clerk, and
That's
we'll find
fine,
that for
Mr.
you.
Chair.
Okay.
That's fine. And then a thank you for the service on the Finance Committee to Sophie Chattel, Heath MacDonald, and to formerly PS, now Cabinet Minister Terry Beach. So congratulations to Terry, and a big welcome to Miss Joanne Thompson, to Patrick Wheeler, and to Rachel Bendian. It's great, and looking forward to working.
MP Lawrence, I'm just going to jump in. It's MP Weiler.
Weiler,
MP
sorry.
Weiler.
My
Yeah, I had said Wheeler, yeah, but it is
my
Weiler.
apologies,
Yeah.
my apologies. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And great panelists, and merci, thank you, and Miigwech for all of you coming to today. My questions will focus on Mr. Rabideau for my 5 minutes or whatever is left. And so, but please don't take that as any sign of disrespect. I'm sure you all have valuable contributions to make. Mr. Rabideau, you've commented at some level of detail about the Canadian housing situation, in particular how dire the situation is, the doubling of mortgage and rental costs, the inability of Canadians to obtain reasonable housing. And I was just wondering if you might be able to start our question and answer by talking a little bit about the current landscape and what you see coming in the Canadian housing market as briefly as you can in the next 6 to 12 months there.
Certainly, I will try to be brief. The current affordability dynamics will certainly exert downward pressure on demand, and I expect that we will see prices grind lower over the next 6 to 8 months. Inventory is still remarkably low. There's not a lot to buy out there. The concern looking beyond this immediate, call it year or two, where interest rates will pressure affordability, is that we're starting to see a steep drop-off in investment in new housing, which is partly a function of higher rates. And so the concern is that the other side of this kind of housing demand trough is we may be facing a severe supply crunch, and we may very quickly revert back to kind of the supply crises that we've had in the past. And so we're currently in a trough. We may very well be heading for a severely stressed market going forward.
Terrific. One issue you've written and talked about in the future or in the past is static variable mortgages. Those are mortgages that are variable, and meaning that the amount of interest being owed continues to increase as interest rates have been increased, but the actual payment stays the same. And how the banks accomplish that is they push out the amortization. However, the challenge is that when they renew, as they will in 2024 and 2025, it has to revert back, as I understand it, to the original amortization, pushing up the amount that the individual will have to pay and owe. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about that and the issues that could cause for Canadians.
You've got the dynamic exactly right. So the idea is we hold interest or hold payments constant, extend the amortization, and today we have a number of banks that have up to 20% of their mortgage book that is negatively amortizing. The Bank of Canada has done good work on this, and they've found that if we roll forward the clock to 2024, 2025, and we look at rates where they are currently, there'll be a number of households facing 40 to 50% payment increases, which will just be unmanageable for some cohort. I'll stop there.
Rabideau, I really appreciate that. And then we've just, I believe today, that the government 5-year bonds hit a 15-year high at 4.278%. Maybe you could talk about the impact that will have on the mortgage market there, my friend.
Certainly. So mortgage rates broadly have been more or less stable over the last three or 4 weeks. They'll start to trend up based on the pricing in the bond market. So we should expect by this time next week, fixed mortgage rates will probably be 20 basis points or 0.2% higher. As to what that means for affordability, we're already at near record levels of unaffordability. It'll add, I don't have the exact number, but probably another $100 a month onto the monthly mortgage payment a buyer would need to buy into this market on kind of the average priced home.
Thank you. And you've also talked about in the past the potential, some of the consequences, which could be mortgage defaults going forward. We saw from the time that the finance minister pronounced that they had won the battle with inflation, it actually increased by 43%. And of course, if inflation continues to go up, the Bank of Canada may be forced to increase interest rates, which will drive up mortgage costs. With the static mortgages, the potential increase in interest rates and the overall just increasing of inflation, the cost, and the lack of supply coming onto the market with the increased demand, which you've talked about, could you see perhaps a scenario where mortgage defaults increase dramatically in the next, say, 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, I think it's very likely that they'll probably more than double. So, but for context, we're starting from extremely low base. We have 15 basis points of delinquencies, which is pretty much an all-time low. They will go up. Partly it's being masked by pandemic savings, by some of the dynamics within the mortgage market, like those static payment variable, which have shielded Canadians from some of the impact of higher rates. But I think they'll likely double. Now, that sounds dramatic, but that still leaves us roughly in line with long-term norms. So I'll stop there. But it could be much worse if we get an economic down. That's assuming that the economy holds relatively constant.
Yeah, and unemployment's a big key to that as well. Just briefly, because I've only got 20 seconds left or so, our leader, Pierre Poilievre, has announced a series of potential initiatives that would increase the amount of supply. To my mind, increasing the amount of supply is the key issue long-term in solving this issue. Would you agree or not?
I agree. I think anything that incentivizes municipalities to get on board and say no to NIMBYism is welcome. There are certainly demand-side measures we need to explore, but I'll leave that for another time.
Thank you, and thank you, MP Lawrence. And now to MP Zarowitz for 6 minutes.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. And I just want to say it's great to see all my colleagues, all returning ones, some of our new ones. Very much look forward to a productive session where we're working on the issues that are important to Canadians. And I want to say a huge thanks to all the presenters. It was outstanding presentations. Thank you so much for beginning our pre-budget consultations today. I'm going to start off actually my questions very quickly to Mr. Schiffer. Mr. Schiffer, I'm really glad that you presented to us today. Thanks so much for the work that you do. I have felt being on finance for a number of years that the voice of urban Indigenous leaders have been missing from Finance Committee. So glad that you joined us. I just want to be clear on your recommendation. It seems like what you've indicated is there's a lot of great federal funding that is going to children, but it's on reserve, and we are missing a little bit in terms of both the voice at the table of urban Aboriginal children sort of supporters, and there's a need for us to maybe redistribute the dollars a little bit more better. So if you could you just maybe clarify for the committee what percentage of on reserve versus off reserve children are there? So is it 50-50? Is it, if you could clarify that, and then if you could give us your specific recommendation, and I'll have to cut you off after a minute because I have a few more questions for Mr. Bousso and Mr. Letko.
No, 100%, and thank you. So, we do see variation across Canada, but we can say that within every province and territory, the majority of Indigenous people are living off reserve, so above 50%. In Ontario, it's a little bit higher. The other thing that I think is really important to note is that, while many Indigenous people are living on reserve communities don't often have all of the programs and services that they may require. And so we see a lot of Indigenous people who live on reserve leaving reserve to access those programs and services, right? So a lot of the people we're providing services to in the city of Toronto, many of them live here, many don't. Many are coming to access programs and services that don't. So the on-reserve, off-reserve dichotomy is really not an effective one. It doesn't take into account not only the demographic shifts of where people live, but how people are moving across those jurisdictions to access the programs and services they need. And that's really a big gap, is understanding how much of the service provision is actually occurring off-reserve, and how the role of the federal government in funding those services.
And I think your recommendation, if I understood clearly, is that we already have 3 very well-developed programs, and just to do better distribution of the funds, both on reserve and off reserve, depending on where the children are at.
100%. It can be a lot more work to create new mechanisms. Why reinvent the wheel when we've already got them? So I think pouring more funding into those mechanisms and ensuring that urban agencies have access, and also really looking at some of the eligibility requirements around who counts as Indigenous in terms of accessing those fundings, but I can leave an explanation around that to another time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for that. And then Mr. Wilso and Mr. Letko, very disturbing information, but it's needed. It was needed for us to hear that. In 1990, 80% of pension investments were in Canada, and now we're down to about 4%. As someone who deals with a lot of innovators, we have a lot of great money to help invest in new companies, new entrepreneurs, but there's a lot of more investment that's needed in the second, third, fourth stage. And so there's a lot of need for funding of Canadian innovation and the Canadian economy. My first question to you is, how does the 4% compare to other G7 OECD comparable countries, just so that we get an idea about what typically happens with pension funds in other countries? And then if you could be a little bit more specific about your recommendation about how we can change that. I know you indicated there's a mixture of policy and regulations, but if you could be a little bit more specific on what might be your recommendation for our committee to consider.
So Canada distinguishes itself on being the country, the developed country that invests the least in its own economy. Canada would be, let's say that if I take this 10% number, in Australia, for example, which would be a comparable country, it would be close to 50%. In the United States, which is one of the most developed, successful economies and things like this, it's around 75%. So we are well below. With regards to innovation and things like this, yes, we are a very innovative country, and it's well documented and things like this. But for every dollar we spend in R&D in Canada, Israel spends 2. Israel's a smaller economy. For every dollar we spend in Canada, the U.S. spends 40. So we are innovating and things like this, but we could do a lot more. With regards to potential solutions and things like this, I think that the last time I appeared in front of this committee was 40 years ago, and yes, 40 years ago. So I was presenting in the name of the Canadian National Pension Fund, where I worked at that time, and the argument that we were putting forth was that pension funds, which were limited to 10% foreign investments, that limit should be removed. Now I'm here arguing a bit the reverse of that. Okay, so that's how life goes. It's not my fault. But the solutions at that time were very stipulative. You had to do this, you had to do that, and things like this. So now we're in a much more fluid world. So I don't think that we should go back to the way the strict stipulations. So one way of doing that, and I think it can all be done by regulations, is to introduce a concept of reserves. So if you invest in an Indonesian bank, it's more risky. Okay, so basically a system of reserves, and I can go into more detail in our documents and things like that.
Zerowitz, and now we're going to MP Samari, please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to greet all our colleagues, and as did Julie and Philippe, greet the colleagues we're seeing again, thank those who have left us, and welcome new colleagues. And well done, Rachel, on becoming Parliamentary Secretary. My questions are for Ms. Véronique Laflamme of Frappru. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having explained what Frappru represents. Ms. Laflamme, did you have time to complete your statement? And if not, did you want to complete it? Hello, Mr. Sainte-Marie, and good morning to committee members. No, I had come to the recommendations. That's all I had really left to present. The recommendations we had for the Standing Committee on Finance. We would like to make the following recommendations for the next budget. We would like the government to reallocate, as many organizations are asking, the amounts committed to affordability in the national housing strategy with a view to increasing the percentage of off-market social housing in Quebec and Canada. This will need programs dedicated to forms of social housing, housing cooperatives, and public housing. In Quebec, this would go through municipal housing offices and nonprofit organizations. This would make it possible to meet a variety of needs. Indigenous people in the cities, women, families, people victims of domestic violence, and others would be helped. This takes a transfer for the provinces, which already have programs in place, so funding transfers are needed, and it would also take new, predictable, and recurrent funding for the rapid initiation of projects that would meet urgent needs. This can't be the social initiative funding off-market social housing because it is dedicated to very vulnerable households, which is all very well, but we also need programs for low and medium income households that have no particular needs, that aren't on the streets, but that might well end up there if we don't help them quickly. We would also need a program to acquire and renovate rental housing units, rental housing buildings, with sufficient subsidies to guarantee a return on investment and maintain those apartments. We would also wonder how this would be managed on a Canadian scale with specific long-term commitments that could eventually be transferred to the provinces, which set up similar programs themselves. In conclusion, what we need are policies to implement the right to housing that Canada has committed to implement and formally recognized with Bill 219. It needs a sustained effort. Current financial measures seem to only encourage private sector investment. That is not enough. Thank you. Like the last time you were before us, I would like you to explain the difference between what we see in the budget now, which uses the term affordable housing, in relation to what you are describing as social housing. So what is the difference between the two, and why is it social housing that needs to be supported? There is a significant difference. Thank you for the question. Affordable housing is a very elastic concept. When we look at the definition of Canadian society or the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation's definition, affordable housing means not more than 30% of income is spent on housing. Different instances and authorities describe it differently. Some people base that on a percentage of all households, for example, of a given region, and the average rent, for example, in Montreal was over $2,200 a month. So affordability doesn't really explain things clearly. It's much too elastic a motion. I'm talking now about social housing, not for profit. Social housing is public, moderate rents for medium income households. These are public services, and there are unionized public employees working on it. The waiting list is non-discriminatory. Unfortunately, social housing lists are very long. There are also social housing in the form of cooperatives, which meet the needs of both medium and low-income households and make it possible for renters to collectively own or rent and to have more control over their living environment. There are also nonprofit housing organizations that are a bit more flexible, where boards of directors have a different makeup but are not for profit. That is social housing. We mean housing that is off the private market. There is no profitability goal. There is a social mission, and affordability is permanent if units are protected as they are in Quebec. They're protected against resale. But what we need are long-term agreements, so affordability is protected. Thank you. I will try to ask some more questions during the next round. Thank you.
Samadi, and I do understand now that, Madame Laflamme, you are able to be here through the whole meeting. Yeah, great. Okay, excellent. So now to MP Blakey for 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and I'll take my turn just welcoming the new members of the committee and saying hello to the returning members and thank you for the work to previous members of the committee who are no longer at the table. This week we've seen a couple announcements from various parties on the question of housing, but I would put to our witnesses that what those proposals, whether it's the Liberal proposal on GST or whether it's Mr. Poilievre's bill on housing share, is that they're both market-based measures. And so I'll start maybe with Ms. Brusk from the CLC. Just want to say or ask you, in your opinion, do you think that market-based initiatives alone are going to solve the housing crisis, or do you think it's important that the federal government also implicate itself very seriously in a number of ways in developing non-market housing, whether it be through the cooperative movement, the nonprofit movement, or government-built housing?
Thank you for that. And we certainly believe that market-based housing has created some of the challenges and issues that we're facing currently. We believe that there's a very important role that the federal government needs to play in terms of becoming involved in the housing market, in terms of funding new opportunities, and in terms of funding social housing. So the funds that we're looking for is really to make sure that there's an establishment of that opportunity for the federal government to play a much more significant role. The expansion of the government role and the public ownership is absolutely critical if we want to solve the housing problems right across this country. And we hear it every single day from workers right across this country who are priced out of the housing market. You know, rent evictions, rental units going up, and, you know, we hear it constantly. Workers working full-time jobs, having more than one person in the household, still not being able to find housing that meets their needs, that's actually affordable. And so our federal government absolutely has a critical role to play.
Very much for that. Madame Laflamme, vous avez déjà...
Ms. Laflamme, you've already spoken on this to some extent, but I would like you to go back to it. Do you think it's appropriate to have market measures in a housing strategy to end the housing crisis? Or should the emphasis be on the nonprofit sector, cooperatives, and turn to government to successfully build social housing and social and affordable housing? We agree with the previous witness. Market-based solutions have been used by the federal government for over 25 years, ever since it withdrew from directly funding social housing. The housing crisis and the homelessness crisis we're seeing now across Canada are the primary consequence of the federal government's abandonment of the social housing sector. As I was saying, renters who separate women who are victims of domestic violence, people who simply cannot make ends meet when they need to leave because they've been evicted or for other reasons, there is no social safety net, there is no housing for them, and that is the primary cause of the visible and invisible homelessness around us. So we have to come back to structural solutions, solutions for which we have a guarantee of permanence and for which we have a guarantee that the needs, the most urgent needs, will be met. Market-based housing, well, we don't think that affordability issues can be fixed by flooding the market with market-based housing. We need to flood it with not-for-profit housing because that's what will contribute to bringing housing prices down and fight inflation.
Pharmacare certainly emphasized the benefits to human health and the health of Canadians, but also some very real financial benefits. So I wonder if you could just speak to the importance of the single payer model in realizing those financial benefits.
I'm sorry, was that directed at me? I didn't hear the intro part. Certainly, we believe very, very strongly that a single payer pharmacare system is what's needed in Canada. And we hear from workers daily that they are falling between the cracks in terms of being able to access the medicines that they need. It is critical that we provide the same level of coverage right across this country, regardless of what sector or what geographical location that you are in, because we know that a single payer pharmacare system also means a decrease in the cost to provide that kind of a service to all Canadians. And we know that based on the Hoskins report, the savings that are tangible that can be seen for not just individuals, but also employers and businesses right across this country. So it is critical that every Canadian be able to access the medicines that they need so that they're not ending up in doctors' offices and that they're not ending up in emergency rooms. And the only way to do that is to actually implement a full single-payer pharmacare system right across this country.
Very much. Apparently I'm out of time. Okay, for the next round.
For the second round, and that's what we're moving into. And we are starting with the Conservatives. Timings are a little different in this round, just for the witnesses' knowledge. And so it'll be 5 minutes for MP Morantz.
Dr. Lee, thank you for being here. I wanted to ask you about the recent calling in of the grocery executives to Ottawa to dress them down for their so-called obscene gross profiteering during the pandemic. I'm pretty sure when they showed up, I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that meeting, but I'm pretty sure when they showed up, they would have said something like, well, our margins are between 2% and 4%. Really, the problem has to do with the supply chain, and there's all kinds of reasons for that. One of the things that concerns me, though, as the Prime Minister said over and over, as recently as yesterday in question period, that if they didn't lower their prices, that he would hit them with a punitive tax of some sort. And I'm wondering if you could get your thoughts on the idea of a tax. I'm not sure how a tax on grocers makes groceries more affordable for consumers. And also on this idea that government would actually publicly decide to use a tax as a punitive measure to actually punish a business because the business isn't doing exactly what the government wants it to do, and what that says about our society.
Thank you. As you can imagine, I'm sure you all know, taxation has been studied by scholars and practitioners going back literally into the Middle Ages, going back to the government of England. It was the original instrument of government policies, long before other more sophisticated instruments came along. Nobel Prizes have been given in this subject, and so I'm just going to summarize really quickly. And I think I'm fairly conveying the consensus of the research, which is thousands of books and articles and so forth. A tax increase is contractionary because, like interest rate increases, it takes money out of your pocket. And a tax is defined as a compulsory payment by government. That's the OECD definition. So taxes raise costs. They don't reduce costs. It doesn't matter what the motive is. We won't get into motive whether it was because we're trying to reduce carbon, the use of carbon, or some other, or alcohol taxes because we want to discourage alcohol. It doesn't matter the reason. Taxes, when you put a tax increase through, it raises prices, and when you put a tax cut through, you cut prices. In fact, I agree with Mr. Robideau about the tax cut for rental houses. That's going to be a game changer for rental properties because it's going to reduce prices. It's not going to increase prices. It's going to reduce them because they're reducing the tax. So if such a tax was imposed on food prices in Canada, it will raise, ceteris paribus, it will raise the price of food. I mean, the research and the literature and the empirical data on this is so crystal clear. I just can't explain it.
You could touch on this idea of using it as a punitive measure, because that's sure what it sounds like. It sounds like a threat. Is that appropriate for a government to be doing in Canada?
Well, let me go more big picture because I'm worried about the, as I've already mentioned in my opening comments, and nobody's talking about it in this country hardly at all, except I think David Dodge and a few other people like that. And we are seeing a decline in business capital expenditures. And people can say, their eyes glaze over CapEx. What's that? Philip Cross, a very senior, distinguished economist for 35 years at StatsCan, came to my class just before the pandemic, and he put it really nicely, and I've been using it ever since in my class. If you want to know how any economy in the world, what it's going to look like in 3 or 4 or 5 years, look at total aggregate business investment today. And if it's going down, your economy is going to look pretty shabby in 3 or 4 or 5 years. Why? Because business capital investment is the plant and equipment and the machinery that produces the growth, the revenues, the sales of every business in the economy. So it is not just another investment. It is absolutely crucial to the prosperity and the standard of living of any country, anywhere. And so our business capital investment is going down. Now, to your question, if we start threatening companies, it doesn't matter what the motive or the reason is. Person can have the best motives of all, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And my point being, all we're doing is putting a target on us, saying foreign capital or FDI, foreign direct investment, around the world, or domestic capital. We're not very friendly to you. So they're saying we're putting a target saying, don't invest here. The United States is much more friendly. Europe's more friendly. Go there. Don't come here. That's the last message on earth that we want to send to investment, because investment's mobile. We cannot compel investors with money to invest in Canada. They have choices. So that's my reaction.
Is that it? I have so many more questions. Just 2 more minutes.
You'll have more time, MP Morantz. So over to MP Baker for 5 minutes.
Thanks so much, and I'd like to come back to Mr. Brousseau. Mr. Brousseau, did you want to add anything to that discussion that was just happening at all? If not, I have some questions to follow up on your testimony to Ms. Zerwitz.
I agree. Investment is fundamental to the vibrancy of the country, and Canadian pension funds leaving Canada is not a good sign. It's bad.
Can I add something to this?
Sure.
Yeah. It's really important to understand, what the pool of capital is available here in Canada and who controls it. You have banks that have about 36% of financial savings, pension funds about the same amount, and insurance companies at about 27%. But they each have different strategies which reflect the nature of their liabilities. Banks, you go to bank, you got your salary last week, and you go to the automatic teller and you're taking your money out almost immediately. So they have a very short investment horizon. So they tend to invest in short-term loans. If you look at the insurance industry, it's a longer-term liability, but can be calculated out and quite structured. And so what insurance companies do is they buy bonds of various durations over time. Pension funds have got capital available for the very long term. It's very stable capital. It can withstand lots of volatility. And it's perfect for investing in equity, in ownership in businesses, and taking risks. Now, what we've tried to illustrate here is that money is not staying in Canada. We've had a huge shift away from Canada, whether it's in the public markets or even in private equities. It's not good. This is a serious issue. You have a pension fund like the Ontario Teachers Plan, which has 0.1% invested in Canadian stocks. Now think about this for a second. They represent the people, the beneficiaries there are the folks that are training the next generation of Canadians for productive employment. And they're not investing in this country. So this is a big problem, and it's got to be addressed. And we have some ideas on how we can do that. I involve a little bit of detail, but perhaps I can just stop there.
Well, that's very helpful. I mean, I have about a minute and a half left with the two of you. So, and maybe I'll go Mr. Brousseau and Mr. Letko, if you'd like to answer, up to you. But you were talking to my colleague, Ms. Zerwitz, about how you would go about ensuring that pension funds were invested here. You were talking about a reserve system. In 60 seconds, could you describe to us what that would look like?
Probably not. Okay, so if you have $100 to invest, you invest it in Canada, when you not look at your liabilities, you're either solvency or going concern, they are what they are. You look at your assets. $100 invested in a Canadian company, assets valued at $100. $100 invested in an Indonesian bank, you just say you count it for $80. The other $20 is a reserve. You still make the money on the $20, but you're only credited for $80. So the sponsor will say, well, do I really want to put up an extra $20 when I could earn the same return, get the same credit if I invested in Canada? So the tendency will be say, no, I don't want to put up extra dollars. And that's basically the reserve system. So things that you want to discourage, you ask them to set aside reserves, and when you calculate the assets, you discount these reserves. That's all. Very simple. You can do that by regulation.
That was excellent, and that was very helpful, and that was 60 seconds. So it can be done. So thank you. If I may, colleagues, I apologize to the witnesses here briefly, but I'd like to take my last minute, Mr. Chair, to give a notice of motion. I don't plan to move it today. I can't, but I'd just like to give colleagues advance notice, and I'll read it now into the record, and we'll email this to the clerk as well, so all members have a copy. The motion is that the committee undertake a study of the current state of Canadian pension funds and the plans investments of Canadians' retirement savings abroad. That as part of the study, the committee study the drivers of greater investment allocations outside of Canada, assess the associated economic impacts to Canada's economy, and consider the merits of increasing Canadian domestic allocation. That the list of witnesses include executives of Canada's federally regulated pension plans, experts, and academics to testify. That the committee hold no less than 2 meetings on this subject.
Thank you, MP Baker, and that is the time. Thank you very much. Now we are over to MP Sainte-Marie for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, on a beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a number of interesting subjects we could focus on. I have 2.5 minutes, as you said, Mr. Chairman, and I would like to turn my questions to Ms. Laflamme. You said in the short term, perhaps even in the fall economic update, there should be new predictable and recurrent funding in the initiative, the accelerator for new builds. Why is that important in the short term? Yes, thank you for the question. The initiative was set up in the fall of 2020 during the pandemic. It was not part of the national housing strategy at the outset. There were 3 phases to the initiative. In Quebec, it has made it possible for housing projects, social housing projects directed by nonprofit housing organizations to be implemented quickly. So it's making a difference in cases where there is an urgent need for social housing projects to be executed quickly. We also wish to see predictable subsidies to help renters as well as community support. Of course, agreements with the Quebec government will be needed so they fund the subsidies, but this would be as part of social housing projects. There should also be provision for providing financial assistance to low-income renters because rents might still be too high for them. So we are encouraging the government to move ahead with that. Thank you. You also said there was too long between the moment that appropriations were approved and the money actually flowed in Quebec. Yes, for example, the $900 million from the Housing Accelerator Fund, the mayors are taking a long time. It can take up to 3 years before an agreement can be signed with Quebec after the announcement is made by the federal government. That's what happened with phases 1, 2, and 3 of the initiative. So funding really has to flow more quickly, and this could happen if programs were aimed at social housing and if there could be a quick transfer with a provision for provinces that have existing social housing programs to opt out We aren't really big supporters of the co-investment fund, but there is a co-investment component that makes it possible to complement funding, and technical resources groups tell us that it would help new stock to be made available, new housing stock, while we wait for new federal announcements. Thank you, Mr. Sainte-Marie.
Blakey for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rabideau, earlier you said that you had some ideas on the demand side, and we've talked today about the supply side issues in respect to the housing crisis, and I was curious to hear some of your thoughts on what can be done on the demand side.
Certainly. So, look, I think it's important to recognize that there are no silver bullets. There's no simple solution. It's going to be a number of small incremental policies that can move the needle, but there's certainly some low-hanging fruit here. And so I would say the move towards a national beneficial ownership registry is a welcome move, and there's no reason to delay that. Okay, and so it's understood that we have a problem. We have a fairly porous border as it relates to international capital. We don't want to be a welcoming jurisdiction for anyone globally to park money here. And so we need to know who's owning these properties, and frankly, the creation of that registry would dissuade a lot of that capital flows. That's one. The other thing I would suggest is that we look at a scaled down payment model for multiple properties. So right now, if you buy a second property in Canada, you need to put 20% down at a minimum. There's no reason that for the third it couldn't be 35, for the fourth it couldn't be 50. Like, we just scale up, because ultimately what we have right now is people have access to housing equity that are already in the market, and so that becomes the source down payment for multiple property acquisitions. And it's very difficult for newcomers trying to get into the market. So that's another. The third I would point to is just, look, we have a problem with mortgage fraud in Canada. I would encourage all the members to look at the CBC documentary last year related to this. It's well known within the industry. There is a simple, elegant solution here. Mortgage Professionals Canada has advocated for it in their submission, and it's just to streamline direct income verification between lenders and CRA. So it's just a simple yes/no, verifying line 15,000 on the notice of assessment. It's been live in the U.S. for 20 years. There's no reason that we can't verify income directly from CRA. The mortgage industry is begging for it, and when an industry is begging for regulation to weed out bad actors, we should listen to them. And so there's three off the top of my head, but we could go on. I could follow up offline.
Okay. Any quick thoughts on the role of short-term rental in the demand side equation of the housing crisis?
Yeah, that's another one I think is worth looking at. Again, look, short-term rentals have been a part of the Canadian landscape, in particular regions that tend to skew towards cottage and recreational properties. I don't fundamentally have an issue there. I worry about the impact that it's having in some of the major metros, because the economics on short-term rentals are such that for many people, you can make more renting short-term than you can renting long-term. And so we have seen a flight out of that. Now, I'm not against any bans that we've seen in cities. I think some of that makes sense. I would also just, part of the issue is we have a broken landlord-tenant system, and I'm focusing specifically on Ontario right now, that is very difficult to get anything done, both for protection of renters and protection of landlords. And we often miss that, because it's so often so punitive towards landlords to try to get non-paying tenants, as an example, out, that it encourages people to move into the short-term rental market. And so there's multiple issues to look at within that dynamic.
Thank you for that. Okay, thank you, MP Blakey. Now to MP Chambers for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great discussion today. It's nice when we've got a bit of consistency in theme, but also I think we've had opportunity for all of our witnesses to present. I just wanted to follow up on my colleague, Mr. Blakey's conversation with Mr. Rabideau. On the mortgage fraud issue, would it surprise you to understand that the CRA today is blocking third parties from verifying income when they already have consent from the borrower and a request from the lender to verify the income?
Yeah, this is a frustration. I don't understand that. I know the basic premise is that this is on privacy grounds, but that, frankly, does not make sense, because borrowers have already given the financial information to the lenders, and all that the lenders are looking for is a yes/no verification of the stated line 15,000 income on the notice of assessment. So there is no privacy issue here. This is a pretty simple API that can be designed. We can debate the magnitude of the problem, but there's clearly a problem, and it's one that has a very simple solution. I don't understand why we're not pursuing that.
Thank you. That's very helpful. There was a small amendment to the budget bill last year, but it might have got mixed with all the other theatrics happening. But I hope that we can advance that issue over this fall and perhaps even into this year's budget. Sticking with you for a second, we talked about short-term rentals. You talked about StatsCan. Does StatsCan have enough or good data on the housing market with respect to, how many people own 10 homes, how many people own 3 homes, how much investment activity, how much short-term rental activity is in the market? Like, do we have the right data with which we can make decent public policy decisions coming from StatsCan?
Great question. And here I want to be careful not to criticize Statistics Canada. They do a great job with the resources that they are given. But the reality is that when you look at the data availability in the United States, it's just an order of magnitude more detailed. And one of the reasons why I have a job at all working with institutional investors is because navigating the Canadian data landscape is such a challenge and such a steep learning curve. It's not easy to find data that we need. In many cases, there are glaring data gaps, and I would certainly welcome any move to better fund Statistics Canada and give more direction around studying the issue of housing and getting better data available for us.
Thank you. So sticking with data, OSFI is still struggling to figure out how much activity in the real estate market is happening in the non-bank, or what we call the shadow banking sector. OSFI at the same time is actually reviewing some of its regulations with respect to stress tests, which in an unintended consequence, perhaps, is pushing more people into the shadow banked sector. In your opinion, if there will be challenges in the mortgage market space, are they likely to emanate from the shadow banking sector or from the highly regulated sector that OSFI is turning the screws on?
Okay, this is a big discussion. I'll try to make it really simple. For the members that maybe haven't looked at this dynamic, in Canada, we have a fairly vibrant private lending market. By and large, these are one-year mortgages, so very short-term mortgages, high interest rates, typically to borrowers that do not qualify at traditional lending institutions. So there's two problems. One is that it's an ultra-short-term nature of these loans, and the second is that the funding behind them is often very flighty. It's often coming from retail investors, many times leveraging a home equity line of credit to lend privately and pocket the difference. There's some concerning dynamics there, and I do worry that we may see a bit of a liquidity issue there. So it's where I'm looking for first, and then we'll see where it goes.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chambers, I saw you. Were you waving at me there?
No, that was good. Just checking my time.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I cut that answer short, but I can elaborate if you want. I thought you were waving me off.
All good. Thank you. May not get a time for another question, but perhaps an observation. Pension funds aren't investing in Canada, perhaps because the opportunities to invest in Canada are very low. And I'll just try to bring a couple things together. We talk about a potential grocery tax. We talk about a bank tax, which is unlikely to bring down prices for consumers. But also, I was sent some information from a bank, their energy investment department, that said 80% of the investments that they've made in the green energy space have actually gone to the United States. It's not for lack of capital, it's for lack of projects and a welcoming investment climate. I will use my time up with that statement, but hopefully one of my colleagues will follow up and let you respond accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Chambers. And now to MP Thompson.
Thank you, and I have to begin by saying how pleased I am to be here. It's a little bit of a quick study because I received notice late yesterday, but I am delighted to have the opportunity to speak to the witnesses today. And I would like to say that certainly coming from the East Coast in St. John's, I'm very pleased with the clean energy projects on the East Coast and certainly in Atlantic Canada. So I'm quite optimistic that indeed, there is local investment and we are leading the way for the country. If I could go back to something you said, Mr. Letko, earlier, and ask you if you could elaborate, please, on the very broad, and I was reading some of this early this morning, the very complex reasons why the pensions are not being invested in Canada. If you could elaborate on that, please.
Well, I think that what has been happening in the marketplace is that there's been a wave in the investment field towards indexation, and so it's a little bit. Danielle often refers to it as the zebra mentality. You know, people just want to be, you know, have a portfolio that doesn't deviate too much from averages, and this has had a big influence on our industry. And Canada is about 3% of the global markets, Morgan Stanley World, and so this has encouraged many investors to think, look, you know, I don't want to be caught way offside and have 10% or 20% in Canada. So unfortunately, that has. The question is this level of investment really adequate? And we don't think so. In fact, as Danielle pointed out, it's been quite harmful and reduced activity. In the end, this is about jobs. Now, people may not be very sympathetic to whether the head trader at Royal Bank of Canada is getting paid well, because he probably is, but it begins there. The investment activity, you know, begins through the trading desks, then it goes through. It has impacts on financings and law firm activity and accounting, and it just radiates through the economy. So I don't know whether that answers your question about why that is happening.
Sorry, please go ahead.
Just on this indexing, which is correct, the 3%, that's what is being used by the international actuaries to say what is a diversified global. But the problem with that is that it means that if you're a small country, you shouldn't invest in yourself. If you're a big country, you should. If you're the U.S., oh yeah, you should put all your money there. In fact, all the world should be putting their money in the U.S., and nobody should be putting any money in Canada. It's a logic which makes absolutely no sense.
So what public policy changes can we make to shift this?
I think we outlined here this. I think it can be done through regulation. And we can incentivize certain behaviors and disincentivize other behaviors by this reserve system. Quite simple, and it's quite analogous to what's being done in the banking industry and in the insurance industry. There are precedents for this.
Is there a global trend away from pension plans in terms of generational shifts, or are we seeing less investment in pension plans? And I'm looking at this in terms of going forward and the stability. We know that there's strong reserves in pension programs now, but is this something that's continuing in workplaces, investment in pensions, or are there alternative investments that younger workers in particular are making?
Very large shift in the coverage of pension of people covered by pension plans in the private sector. In the public sector, definitely a big increase, but in the private sector, a big decrease. And it has a lot to do with the way the regulations have changed to shorten the investment horizon of the valuation of these funds. And by shortening the investment horizon, as they've done, or like actuarial valuations every year and things like this, what it has done is that it's synced it with the business cycle. So when the business cycle turns down, what happens? Interest rates go down. Bank reduces them to get the economy going again. What happens then is that the liabilities go up because the interest rates are used to value the liabilities. On the other hand, economic difficulty, so the assets go down. So all of a sudden you go through a business cycle and you have an increase in your liabilities, a decrease in your assets, and you got a lot of stress. So that stress requires you to put money into your fund. At a time when your business is not doing so well, and you say, well, why am I going to do that? So the consequences, all the business says, I don't want anything to do with this. It used to be, when I referred 40 years ago, we used to be able to amortize the assets over 25 years. We used to be able to make up the difference over 25 years. It was all smoothed out, which is what we have to go back to also.
MP Thompson. And now moving to the third round, members. So we have MP Morantz for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Professor Lee, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, there's a number of things, but you know, I remember, speaking of 40 years ago, there was a government program called the MERB, the Multi-Unit Residential Building Program, and what it did was it allowed average investors who would take the risk of investing in development of multi-unit residential buildings to take the depreciation, the capital cost allowance, and soft cost expenses in the year of construction against their personal or professional income. My recollection is that that program was highly successful at getting hundreds of thousands of apartments built across the country. Now, it was nice to see the Liberal government actually providing a tax concession to business people finally. If we did that, they'd be accusing us of providing tax breaks to our wealthy business friends, and but I won't say that about them. But that's what they would say. But in any event, I'm curious what you think of an idea like that, and what other types of measures or tools could be used within the Income Tax Act to incentivize the construction of residences.
I do remember the MERB because I financed some way back when. This was in the late 70s, early 80s. I can't remember the details now at all, I assure you, but they were very popular and they were used widely, and it shows that incentives work. You know, when you provide incentives like that, and I think I agree with Ben, the fundamental problem we have, and others are saying it, CMHC is saying it in their latest report, we need to build more homes. And not only affordable housing in the subsidized market, or whatever word you want to use, but also in the commercial market. But I just want to follow up on it, make it a little broader, my response. I do not, if you look at the sheer magnitude and you accept CMHC's number of 3.5 million shortfall by 2030, and I think most of us do, the idea that governments, plural, can handle the majority of that 3.5 million, I just think is preposterous. There was an op-ed in the Globe just this week showing the sheer math involved. Just multiply it. So what it means is it's going to be fundamentally the private sector that's going to have to be involved. And I'm not talking income to geared to income units. That's the role of government for subsidized housing, or whatever word we want to use. I'm sorry, I'm not using the proper terminology. But for the vast majority of housing that needs to be built, it's going to be done by the private sector, private banks, private capital. And so we need to incentivize that, whether they're high-rise condos, low-rise townhouses and garden homes. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just saying that the idea that we can think that government is going to be, governments, federal, provincial, municipal, are going to solve and come up with 3.5 million homes, or 3 million and 3.5, is mathematically and financially nonsensical.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee. I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to get Mr. Robideau to chime in on the same question while I have about a minute and a half left. Mr. Robideau?
I think thank you. I think the depreciated capital, or the accelerated depreciation capital cost allowance, is something certainly worth examining. The proof is in the pudding. It's worked in the past. There's no reason to think that it wouldn't work in the future. And I would refer the members to some of the work done by Mike Moffat out of, I believe, the University of Western Ontario, who's done some excellent work on this front. So does that answer your question?
Yes, we will have a look at Mr. Moffat's work. Thank you for that suggestion. So now, just Professor Lee, just one other thing. We've heard John Manley talk about this recently, and it's something that's been on my mind quite a bit, and I'll try and encapsulate it. Basically, we have government engaging in excessive deficit financing at the same time as the Bank of Canada is engaging in quantitative easing and increasing interest rates to try and rein in inflation. Do you see the fiscal policy of this government and the monetary policy of the Bank of Canada working at cross purposes to each other at this point?
Yes, I do, and so do many people. I mean, deficits are by definition stimulative, regardless of the motive. It doesn't matter what you claim your motive is. Deficits inject money into the economy. And so the metaphor I like to use, I was the caregiver from my late remarkable mother who lived to 91 on her own, and she drove until 88 until I took her car away because she used to drive down the side streets of Ottawa, no exaggeration, 1 foot on the brake and 1 foot on the gas pedal. And it used to confuse, believe me, people behind her. They would see the car accelerating with the brake lights on. And so this is an excellent metaphor for monetary and fiscal policy should be operating in concert. If we go into a recession, we stimulate through driving down interest rates and running up deficits. They're in concert. But right now, we're trying to cool down the economy because the economy's too hot, as the governor has told us repeatedly in the Monetary Policy Report. But what we're doing on the fiscal side is we're counteracting, canceling or partially canceling or offsetting what the central bank is doing. And so we should be sterilizing, and that's the technical term, we should be sterilizing the deficits. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be spending on pharmacare or whatever. It just means that any increases we spend should be covered by an offsetting reduction somewhere else.
Mr. Lee, thank you. And thank you for that metaphor. You know, the family stories, those are always welcome. And so we are now, thank you, MP Morantz, we're moving to MP Weiler, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's a pleasure to be joining this committee for the first time. Ms. Thompson, I just joined the committee or just found out yesterday, so quickly getting up to speed on the matters and already a very interesting discussion that's being had already today. I want to pick up on the part of the testimony from Mr. Rabideau. You were mentioning a few of the demand-side measures that you recommended that the government take, and one of them was on a registry for beneficial ownership. And of course, earlier this year, we passed legislation to have a beneficial ownership registry for companies that are incorporated under the Canada Business Corporations Act. But it was set up in a way that it could work very closely with provincial registries, provincial corporate registries. But what we're talking about here is on, we're talking about real property. And in the province that I live in British Columbia, we did bring in a beneficial ownership registry for real property as well. So I was hoping you might be able to expand a little bit on how the federal government might be able to work closely with such registries where, such matters are in the provincial jurisdiction and how that might be able to impact on the demand side, on housing affordability as well.
Certainly. So, and thank you for the question. As it relates to British Columbia, I'm a little concerned around the kind of user friendliness of that database. It's not easy to search. Ultimately, the disincentive of a beneficial ownership registry is that if you are, and I'll just use a cliche, but let's say that you are an international money launderer, you do not want to be within the purview of your local government or any jurisdiction. And so any country that allows you to obscure ownership and creates a registry that's easily searchable and sort of user-friendly naturally is a jurisdiction that is not particularly welcoming for you. And so British Columbia has made a step in the right direction. It'd be nice to see them open that up and make it a little more user-friendly and searchable. And so I'm not sure that I have detailed answer for your specific question. I don't claim to know the inner workings of those various systems. I would certainly expect this would be a matter that would be of great interest in particularly the more affordability challenged provinces such as British Columbia and Ontario. So I don't know why you wouldn't get a buy-in from the provinces, but as with regards to the specific intricacies, I'm probably not the person to answer directly.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd also like to pick up on a little bit of what Mr. Brosseau and Letko were talking about with respect to pension investment in Canada and really the lack thereof. I'm wondering if you could point to other countries that have been able to address this and what we might be able to learn from those international comparators.
So other countries have not had to address it to the extent of Canada. As I said earlier, domestic equity exposure as a percentage of overall equity exposure in Canada is the lowest compared to anywhere else in the world. Australia is about 50%. U.S. is about 80%. So this is a Canadian problem. We're the first. So we better be the first to solve it, too.
I would add that there is an issue that's being discussed currently in the United Kingdom, where their level of investment, pension fund investment, has been low too. But I don't believe any of that has concluded. But that might be a good place to look to for some guidance.
Okay, in the material that you've submitted, one of the fixes that you've mentioned relates to increased transparency and standards. And I was hoping you might be able to share with this committee just the need for further transparency as it relates to disclosures and reporting of pension fund investments.
Well, one trend, a very strong trend in the investment of Canadian pension funds has been a move towards more investment in private equity, in real estate, infrastructure, and so on. It now accounts for about 43% of total pension fund assets. So what's important here is that when determining solvency, you have to come up with a valuation for these assets. And this is highly dependent on appraisal. Now, I don't know if any amongst you have ever hired an appraiser, but you might remember that the first question that appraisers probably asked you is, what is the purpose for this appraisal? What do you need it for? which should make you a little suspicious. The other I think observation is that if you're not happy with that appraisal, you probably won't be bringing that appraiser back next year. So there's a concern here that there may be some kind of bias that builds into this evaluation of 43% of our assets.
Thank you, Mr. Letgo and MP Weiler. And now for 2.5 minutes to MP Sainte-Marie.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, Madame.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Laflamme, you're asking for all amounts provided for in the National Housing Strategy be directed to social funding through permanent broad programs, comprehensive programs. You said it would be important as well to have new funding for social housing. You also talked about the acquisition and renovation of rental housing program for social housing. Can you please explain how important that demand is and anything else you may wish to add? Yes, thank you for the question. First of all, I didn't talk about the federal initiative nor about surplus federal land. Unfortunately, those are also being used primarily for market-based housing projects. So we can see the negative impact of not targeting investments to make sure that nonprofit sector benefits the most. We did talk about tax incentives and financial incentives to encourage housing, but we are removing incentives that market-based housing projects have now. In Quebec, there's land near the Bonaventure Bridge, for example, that could be used for social housing. So that initiative needs to be better targeted and funded. Let me explain what we need by a comprehensive permanent program. It is a self-sufficient program, as the federal government did with cooperative housing programs in the 90s and with medium rent housing. We will, again, need self-sufficient programs. There is a new cooperatives program that was announced 2 years ago in the budget. We applauded it. We thought it could be incorporated into the Quebec cooperatives financing program, but we really never heard much about it again. It hadn't yet been set up. So it seems that things need to move more quickly. A greater sense of urgency is needed. We also need consultations in the community and in the sector because we do have proposals to put forward. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Blakey for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very Much, Mr. Chair. And I just want to start by thanking all of our witnesses. I do think it's been a very productive conversation. It's the kind of conversation I think we would do well to have more often around this table. And so I apologize that I think the next item of business is probably going to take up what remaining time we have. But there has been some discussion in the summer about, how the committee should structure its work over the fall. And to that effect, I gave notice of a motion a couple days ago that I'd now like to move, Mr. Chair. The motion reads as follows: that the committee recognize and express its concern at the fact that consumer and business insolvencies are on the rise in Canada, as well as the fact that 2/3 of mortgage holders are having trouble meeting their financial commitments, including the nearly 40% of mortgage holders that are borrowing just to pay for daily expenses, and that the committee undertake a study of the public policy decisions and market forces that have led to steep increases in the cost of buying or renting a home in Canada, including, but not limited to, the acquisition of buildings with affordable units by large corporate or institutional investors mandated to maximize shareholder profit, the acquisition of residential properties for the purpose of running a short-term rental business, the acquisition of multiple residential properties for the generation of passive income, the tax treatment afforded to entities that buy, sell, or lease residential properties, the rules governing the provision of mortgages for the purchase of residential properties in Canada, the terms and conditions of Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation mortgage insurance, and the funding of new social and affordable housing by governments in Canada, and that the committee dedicate its regular meetings on September 25th, October 2nd, October 16th, October 23rd, October 30th, and November 6, 2023, to witness testimony on this study, as well as any other meetings the committee deems necessary, and that the committee include evidence from its March 23, 2023 meeting on inflation in the current Canadian economy and its June 15, 2023 meeting on the impact of inflation and interest rates on mortgages in Canada in the evidence for this study, and that the list of witnesses for this study include but not be limited to the Governor of the Bank of Canada, the Chief Executive Officers of Canada's largest commercial banks, the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, the Federal Housing Advocate, the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities, and the Minister of Finance, and that the committee report its findings to the House no later than February 9th, 2024, and that the committee dedicate its regular meetings on September 28th, October 5th, October 19th, October 26th, and November 2nd, 2023 to witness testimony for pre-budget consultation, and that the balance of the committee's regular meetings from November 9th to December 14th, 2023 inclusive be used to examine legislation, prepare a report for the committee's pre-budget consultation, and prepare a report for the study initiated by this motion. So that now being moved, I'll just say, we did have some discussion this summer about the importance of what's happening in the housing market and the significance of the financial squeeze Canadians find themselves in for all sorts of reasons, including higher interest rates and the effects that has had on mortgage payments. I think this committee, given the nature of a lot of public policy that comes out of the Department of Finance that influences the housing market, has an important role to play. I know some members might wonder at particular dates or want to change some of the specific dates in here. I'm not closed to those ideas, but I do think that it's important that we report out on this by February so that this committee and its recommendations, I hope we will find our way to having some recommendations in common, and I expect we will, that those can feed into the budget process for 2024. I think if we were to put off reporting out on our findings past the beginning of February, we may well do a great report. It might even be better than it would have been having been issued at the beginning of February, but it will not be timely. And so I think it's important that we, there's always a lot of demands at this committee table. I know we have some open studies, but I really think that there's an opportunity here to pronounce on the issue of housing and try and provide some meaningful direction in terms of policy. And we shouldn't waste that opportunity. I would say that also means that I think not only should we adopt the study, but we should be disciplined in our work. We've had a lot of extra meeting and a lot of extra time around this table that I would say has produced very little value for Canadians. And so I think we should undertake this study, and I think we should work hard on our pre-budget consultation and making sure we have a timely report for the first time in a long time on that front as well. And that should really be the focus of our work this fall. And if we do it well, and if we don't needlessly delay the examination of other items like the legislation that may come before this committee, I'm optimistic we can make a valuable contribution to the policy debate around housing, that we can do a proper job of our pre-budget consultation, and that we can do our duty in respect to the legislation that's sent here for examination by the House. Thank you.
MP Blakey. I do have a running list of those that like to speak to your motion. I do have MP Helen and MP Zerowitz, and just before MP Helen speaks, I'd just like to say, in regards to the dates, I did, so for Monday, I did ask the clerks because they need the time to be able to secure witnesses for our PBC. So we'll be doing PBC will be on Monday, the 25th. Just, do you want to say something about that? Yeah.
Maybe what we could do then, Mr. Chair, in light of that, if we had unanimous consent of the committee, we could switch the placement of September 25th and September 28th, which would make Monday a PBC day and Thursday a housing study day. And if we could do that by UC, then we could address that issue right off the top.
Okay, I see thumbs up for that. So far for that, yeah, I do see all thumbs up. Okay, great. So we do have UC.
Appel au règlement, Monsieur le Président.
Yeah, MP Samari?
Est-ce qu'on peut...
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. We are talking about future business. So would it be possible to release our witnesses?
I think they're very interested in what we're talking about, but yes, the witnesses are free to go. Thank you very much. We want to thank our witnesses for the amazing testimony, and it gave us a lot of food for thought in terms of housing, in terms of many of the other issues that we are dealing with, and will inform our pre-budget consultation and the report, as you heard MP Blakey said, that we hopefully will get out by the end of the year this year. So thank you. Okay. All right, so to MP Helen and then MP Zerowitz and anybody else, please just raise your hand if you'd like to get on the list.
Thank you, Chair. I'll also take this opportunity to welcome all the new members to the committee and welcome back all the old ones. I will say thank you to Mr. Blakey for bringing this forward. I think it's well in line with the mortgage study that I wanted to get started as well. And I think given the risk of a mortgage default crisis in Canada, according to the IMF, and a serious risk of even negative amortizations, I think this is a very important study right now, very timely. I wanted to suggest two things with this study. One is, I think, I don't know if we can cover, because of the crisis we're in right now, as many witnesses within the dates given. I would propose that we would extend the dates to November 20th, 27th, December 4th, and December 11th. Mr. Blakey, in our discussions, wanted to make sure that we have a report at least before the next budget, and I think that still gives enough time to the clerks, given they're okay, that they could have something ready for us to at least get a report ready by then. I also wanted to see if we could expand, just in writing, some of the witnesses, including in here, I know it says not limited to, but just adding in the CMHC, CREA, the Canadian Real Estate Association, and others in the real estate industry, as well as, I know it says banks in here, but any other related to people that they can talk about some of the real risks in mortgages today. So those are the things I would like to propose. I don't have anything fully in writing, but just a friendly amendment to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen.
Appel au règlement.
I've got MP Zerowitz on the list next.
Je voulais
MP
juste...
Bandayan?
Oui.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask whether we did have these amendments in writing.
I believe they're not in writing. You just...
I can get them in writing, if you'd like.
Okay. So we're going to go to MP Zerowitz, and that's who I've got on my list, and then MP Lawrence.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Blakey. who sits very close to me in the House, and I'm sure we're going to have many discussions on this in the near future. Look, housing, huge issue. Anything we could do to address this issue is, I know it's going to be appreciated by my residents of my riding of Davenport as well as all Canadians. The focus for me, Mr. Blakey, is that this is largely on the financialization of the housing market, which is fine. Like, we need to get to the bottom of what's happening here. What do we need to change? What do we encourage? What do we discourage? And so I wholeheartedly agree with the study. You don't have an issue. I just would, it might be up to we might want to leave it up to the clerk to determine the dates. October 2nd, I think, is a statutory holiday because of Truth and Reconciliation. October 30th is that we have the bank governor. I just would say to you, you want to, I'd love to see an even balance between our pre-budget consultations as well as this study. And so I don't have all the dates right now, but I just want to point that out to you. I'd also say to you, and I would like this on the record, I've met with a number of nonprofits in my riding that have been trying to build deeply affordable housing, with not only within my riding but also across Toronto. And every single one have literally come up with a list of here's what's stopping us at the city level, here's what's stopping us at the provincial level, and here's what's stopping us at the federal level. And literally, I'm starting to come with that list. And so my only comment around this is, if it's only limited to sort of federal agencies, which I know that, we have the authority to be able to change, I just would say we might want to have some provincial or municipal sort of representation, or people who can speak to that as well, because we can incentivize as well what happens at the municipal and at the provincial level as we are moving forward on whether it's regulations or on laws. So I just want to make sure that I articulated that came across very clearly over the summer, and it was very useful information for me. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, MP Zerwitz. I know I have MP Lawrence. I just got a note from the clerk, from our other clerk, that we have a hard stop. We're coming to a hard stop here. So is that... Okay, 15? Did you? Okay.
If you wanted to go.
Okay. Another 15 minutes is kind of what we've been able to secure. I have MP Lawrence and then MP Blakey.
So I'm going to provide you the rebuttal with my argument before I give it. But in Mr. Blakey's, it says in here, including but not limited to, I believe, in discussing potential areas with respect to housing. The one thing that I would like to see specifically added, and I think it's actually very similar with what Ms. Zarowitz was talking about as well, is include here explicitly that we are going to review and study barriers to the construction of new homes or barriers to the creation of new supply, regardless of government level, right? So.
Okay. Thank you, MP Lawrence, MP Blakey, then MPS Ben Dyan.
Such an excellent rebuttal to his own argument, but I think rebuttal's not quite. I think it's not quite the word, because it implies that there's a difference of opinion, or that there's some kind of antagonism there that simply isn't. The reason I said not limited to is exactly because it's hard to come up with a comprehensive list. And I think today was a good example. When you start getting experts in, if we're not just listening to ourselves at this table, which I would say we have too often done, then new things come up and you learn things. And then you find out that not all of your preconceptions are true, or that there are other things that you left out in your analysis. So it's very deliberately constructed in a way to allow us some flexibility as new issues come up, or as existing issues get articulated to be able to pursue those. Just to Ms. Zarowitz's point, I hear you, and it's also why it's not a limited witness list. I think we should think about who else we want to invite, although, notwithstanding Ms. Bendayan's point about some of these dates, the idea was to have enough dates that we do have room for extra witnesses and to get input from the committee on who those witnesses should be. Although I would note that the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is one of the named witnesses, and that's exactly because I do recognize that municipalities have an important role to play, and that there are sometimes barriers to being able to create more supply that happen at the municipal level, which I think is also Phil's point. So what I want to say is that I do think, even as written, I think there is room for all of these things. I think the question, given that we're up against some time constraints, if the committee knows that it wants to proceed with the study, my suggestion would be, let's pass it today, because that empowers our clerk to be able to start going after some of the witnesses and scheduling them. And then if we want to either formally amend the study motion to include some of these things, or if we find that we're able to work it out at the operational level, it's all the same to me. But I would say, let's pass it today. That empowers our clerk to be able to, get our work together for us and to bring people together. And I certainly hope that this won't be the last time that we discuss how to proceed with this study, who we should hear from, and what the important issues are.
Thank you, MP Blake. I have PS Bendayan and then MP Lawrence.
Je vais pas m'attarder trop là-dessus, mais j'aimerais juste...
I won't spend too long on this. I'd just like to thank all colleagues for their welcome to this committee. It's very appreciated. I would just like to respond to my Conservative colleagues.
I appreciate that perhaps it's not ready in writing, the amendments that you proposed, sir, but that's fine. I think we should get them any moment now. That's wonderful. With respect to the witnesses that you're suggesting, I think we can come to an agreement on these. And of course, Mr. Lawrence, the housing supply periods that you're proposing, I think that makes a lot of sense. And in the spirit that Mr. Blakey just finished his intervention about perhaps getting to a vote on this important study today, I would suggest that we perhaps reserve, as is indicated in the motion, let's see how things go, and if we do need additional meetings, then that is possible. But to change the dates, as was proposed by the Conservatives, would seem to me to leave not enough time for us to complete the pre-budget consultations, which I know is a priority for this committee. As colleagues also know, government legislation is going to be coming to this committee, and so I would propose, in the interest of the cooperation I'm seeing around the table, to accept the witness amendments and the housing supply period amendment proposed by my colleague, Mr. Lawrence, and leave the dates as is in Mr. Blakey's motion, again with the hope that we can come to a vote before the end of our meeting today.
Thank you, MP Bendayan. I do have MP Lawrence.
I'm sorry, how much time did we have left there? Sorry.
We got about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, yeah.
Can we just saw off the difference there and just add 2 of the dates, and then other than that, agree with Ms. Bendayan's suggestion. And your French is much better than Terry Beach's. I'm just going to say that.
Members, anybody any
Sorry, Mr.
further
Lawrence.
discussion?
So you're
Yeah.
proposing what? Can you just repeat your proposal for the purposes of the vote?
Adam, do you want to go there? Yeah.
I think we had proposed 4 or 5 more additional dates. I'd just say add 2 additional dates to respect Ms. Zurowicz's very good suggestions about having additional witnesses. I know we have a witness list that is not fully complete, so I would just say if we can add 2 additional dates to the list, so maybe we can do it by number of meetings as opposed to the actual dates, which might be a little bit easier to manage from a proposal perspective for their clerk and clean it up.
Yes, Bendayan and then MP Blakey, although members with the FEZ and any legislation, government legislation, that would take precedence. Just for everybody, is everybody in agreement with that? Yes. Okay. PS Bendayan.
I'm happy to hear the mover of the motion on the proposal on the table. From my perspective, I think we're trying to perhaps schedule and confirm too much in the space of 4 minutes. I understand that normally we do have an opportunity to look at witness lists and submit other witnesses. There's also provisions in this motion that would allow us to add additional meetings if necessary. I would submit, given that we are coming up to 4 minutes before the end of our time, that perhaps we take the spirit of collaboration that we started this meeting in order to advance an important issue, and that is housing.
MP Blakey.
The point that was made about October 2nd and October 30th, why don't we replace October 2nd with November 9th and replace October 30th with November 20th? And that's a starting point. Like, I don't, we can talk more about dates, but that would at least correct some of the issues with meetings that are superseded by the presence of the Governor of the Bank of Canada, although we may want to incorporate that into the study as he's one of the called witnesses for this study as well. Or we could just add November 9 and November 20th to the list. I'm fine with that too. Do you have a preference, Phil? You just want to add them? Yeah? So could I move an amendment then to my own?
Supply in there as well as Ms. Bendanya.
Okay.
If I can say her
Just
last
need some
name.
wording for that. Like, I'm not opposed.
Just it would be also to study barriers to housing supply, new housing supply.
Okay. So we'll add in the itemized list of things to study, barriers to housing supply. And I can't move an
You cannot
amendment?
amend it. No, it would have to be someone else that would
Okay,
have to
could
do
I
that.
propose an amendment for someone else to move?
Yes.
Yeah, so what I would propose, someone move, is that we add to the list of things to study, barriers to housing supply, and that we add to the list of dates for this study, the dates of November 9th and November 20th, 2023.
I'll move that, Mr. Chair.
Hold on. Oh, you're so.
Thank you, Ed.
That came out of nowhere. Both in the same team, Chambers.
Members?
The Chamber's amendment.
So we would have to vote on the amendment first. Yeah. Okay.
Monsieur le Président,
Yes, Ben.
ça fait très.
Mr. Chairman, I would have pleasure in seconding my colleague's motion.
Okay, and a seconder. Okay, great. Okay, so members, and I'll look to the clerk. So on the amendment to the motion? Everybody? Yeah, agreed. Okay. And to the motion as amended? Agreed. Okay, great. So we have a study.
So we got a minute left.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for the collaboration. Thanks for the 100th meeting of our committee. Yes.